Good evening, nobody. Good evening, Steven, I guess.
Hey, I'm listening.
I was literally during those 30 seconds of that countdown, I was like, that's how I'm gonna start this show.
It,
Uh-oh. Well, I'll be.
plan that our moms watch show because they don't.
That's true.
Yeah. But you want to start? Sorry, my internet has been like going in and out. I don't know what's going on with it tonight.
It's okay.
But yeah, but I guess you're hosting tonight. So but NFC, I guess we're doing the NFC East tonight.
Yeah, we're doing the NFC East. If people thought we were gonna do like East, North, South, West, we're not. We're gonna finish with the North because that's where our two favorite teams play in. So we kind of want that to be the last show. So next week we'll do the South, the AFC South. Steven will host. But tonight I'm doing the NFC East. Of course, it'll be similar to last week where Steven hosted last week and I gave my inputs. This week I'm hosting. Steven will give his inputs. We're going to start in the Lone Star State, the Dallas Cowboys. They're going to be the first team we review. Okay. So before we start talking about this year's Dallas Cowboys, we have to talk about last season. Last year, the Cowboys won the NFC East for the second time in 3 years. They were really kind of playing their best football down the stretch. I know I actually had kind of forgotten until I was looking through their like schedule and results and all that. That they did get throttled by Buffalo in that one Sunday late afternoon game. And I know they lost a really close game on Christmas Eve to Miami, but that's when Miami looked like that looked like when Miami was going to finally overcome the December woes. And obviously they didn't, as we talked about last week. But they finished strong. They had that really exciting game against Detroit that felt like a playoff game that Saturday night in week 17. And they had a pretty comfortable win in week 18. They went into the playoffs as the 2 seed. Now, everybody was kind of assuming that it was going to be Dallas visiting Santa Clara, California again. But this time, maybe to go to the Super Bowl. Now, Dallas getting to the NFC Championship has been very difficult for them over the last 30 years. They haven't done it since 95, but it seemed like this was possibly going to be the year that they were going to do it. They had a top 10 offense and defense. Dak was second in the NFL in success percentage, according to Pro Football Reference. He only trailed Brock Purdy. I mean, that's pretty good. And it actually wasn't even like one of Dak's 3 best seasons, which I think we're going to talk about here in a little bit.
Yep.
But all of that just to get absolutely throttled by Green Bay. Steven, you're a Packers fan. I know you felt confident because you felt like you were playing with house money going into that game, if I recall, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean,
Did you see that happening?
No, I didn't see a blowout happening. I thought that they could play with Dallas. And it's really going back to the 2022 game where they beat them at Lambeau. I also thought Dallas was, and we'll get into their defense, they were pretty poor against the run. And I feel like the way the Packers offense operates, that's I think Dallas didn't match up very well with Green Bay. In hindsight, now I don't think anybody anticipated the type of game that ended up happening. Like,
yeah,
they had no answer for the Packers offense, and Dak made a couple huge mistakes. The Darnell Savage interception to be one, and it almost seemed like the CeeDee Lamb connection that they had all year was a little bit off. But the thing about that wild card loss is it overshadowed, I mean, how good the Cowboys actually were last year. I mean,
yeah.
everybody always says, the Cowboys are overrated. I agree with that like 99% of years. Last year, and really, I've been a Mike McCarthy defender, and this. Some of our audience probably knows this, but McCarthy, since joining Dallas in 2020, is 43-28, and he's actually won more games over the last 3 seasons than any coach in the NFL not named Andy Reid.
Wow, that's pretty good company. Oh,
but hey, this guy's on the hot seat, by the way. Like, because of postseason failures, and even in one of those postseasons, they actually did win a playoff game, and they were Tom Brady's last playoff game. And
last ever.
That game almost gets ignored.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's kind of funny. Like, and it was a road playoff win. For that, really, they
won it in the Blues too. They won it in the Blues for the first time since 1978, as we talked about with our buddy Mark.
Yeah, so they had so many. To me, I think the Cowboys are actually. I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year, because I think they have lost some talent, and they haven't really been able to replace, especially like on the skill side.
Mm-hmm.
And you lose Tyron Smith, who's actually pretty productive. I don't see Dallas necessarily being a Super Bowl contender this year, but I think they could very well still play with Philly for the NFC East. I think everybody's kind of projecting Philly to be the favorite for the NFC East. I think it's neck between these two. And some other notes I had on Dallas. You mentioned Dak is second in the league in success percentage according to Pro Football Reference. I actually went back and watched a lot of the games from week 1 through really December. And I think Dak even deserved the MVP over Lamar Jackson. The only guy I think that was more deserving was probably Josh Allen. But I think the way I would probably put my ballot in hindsight is I don't even think Lamar would be second. I think Dak had a better season and was more valuable to his team than even Lamar was to the Ravens. But honestly, the Cowboys had a special season. The only thing that was in their way was a team that was probably even more special than they were, the 49ers. But that Green Bay playoff loss, it really overshadowed, I think, a really, really well-run team. I think they were one of the top 5 teams in football last year, and people are going to completely forget that because of how badly they lost to a young team in the wild card round.
Yeah. What I think with the season and my notes, I did this for everybody. I kind of have a theme or a question for, it's really everybody's just a question. I don't know why I called it a theme when it's really just a question for the season. But my theme for Dallas is, what does this team and Dak have to do to secure not only his, but Mike McCarthy's futures in Dallas? Now, I think we can kind of guess what Mike McCarthy might. Well, maybe we don't have to. Maybe there is some nuance to that. But what Dak might have to do, they're both not mutually inclusive. We'll say that. There's.
Yeah, well, I think. Yeah, I think with the Dak Prescott situation, they almost have to make that work. Yeah. Because if you don't, you're going to be stuck. It's a lot easier to replace a head coach of Mike McCarthy's caliber. I think he's a good coach, but
4 years, man. I remember when he broke his ankle, and everybody was talking about that contract, and here we are again. It seems like that happened a year ago.
And to give Dak credit, financially speaking, he's smart for doing it the way he's done it. They can't even franchise him. No. I actually am speculating that I think he might sign with the Giants. At the end,
I think that's going to be the hot topic. Him going to New York, or hell, he could go to either one of the New York. Well, no, the Jets. They gave Rodgers a 3-year deal, didn't they?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not going to be the Jets
unless he retires or something. But I mean, really, the team that we don't even know what the quarterback class of rookies looks like. we just had a really deep one.
Mm-hmm. And you had a Kirk Cousins at free agency.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I'm the Cowboys, like I'd still be trying like hell to figure out an extension with Dak. Now, whether they get that done before the season starts, because I think once the season starts, they're not going to get that done.
Oh gosh,
it's just going to they're going to have to let him go to free agency at that point, because at that point the risk is on Dak Prescott. But what's interesting about this Dallas team, and this is almost more of a 2025 like and beyond take, or really analysis, I guess, is Mike McCarthy, 1 year contract, or 1 year left on his deal. Brian Schottenheimer, 1 year left on his deal. Mike Zimmer, it's a 1 year deal. Dak Prescott is on the last year of his deal. CeeDee Lamb is up for a contract, because I guess right now they're in the 5th year of CeeDee Lamb. Micah Parsons is about to get paid like hell too, because I mean he's going into his 4th year, so they're definitely going to pick up the option for him, because he's one of the best players in the league. Like, they're obviously going to take the 5th year option there. There's a lot of questions for Dallas right now, and people ask, like, why didn't you go out and add any players? It's like, how can you?
Yeah, they're so strapped.
They're so strapped because you got to figure out how to get Dak under contract, and if you're Dak, you're like, I have more leverage if I just wait this out another 8 months, because then he can go to free agency and then he can get whatever guaranteed money he wants. I think, but the funny thing is, this team is pretty talented. Like, they have, I just mentioned a whole, that's a group of stars, essentially. Like, CeeDee Lamb is one of the best receivers in the game. Looking at his stats from last year: 135 catches, 1,749 yards, 12 touchdowns. They have a lot tied into like 3 or 4 players that are just difference-making players. Like, Micah Parsons is one of the best edge rushers in the league. What's really cool about Parsons too is that he can actually play off the ball or on the ball, like, or on the line of scrimmage. It makes him so special. I'm kind of excited to see what Mike Zimmer does in this scheme. Yeah, because, like, if you remember Anthony Barr, like, Anthony Barr was a freak athlete, that, like, former running back that played at UCLA, went first round to the Vikings in 2014. And he used Anthony Barr like you think he would. Like, he brought him on pressures a ton, like, because the way Mike Zimmer plays defense and schemes things up is he's going to stress you pre-snap, right? So watch old Vikings games from like 2014 through 2021. Like, they look like they're blitzing every single play. And sometimes they drop everybody back into coverage and then they don't. Like, and Micah Parsons is like that kind of player that, like, I think is just perfect for that scheme. So I'm really excited to see that, to see what they do with him. But you don't want to take him too much off the edge because he's just so special. But I mentioned, like, Tyron Smith is gone. I mean, Zach Martin's getting old.
Yeah.
They kind of addressed, they almost had the draft that I would expect them, or like that I would do, is like they've addressed their lines of scrimmage. They're going to pay CD. They're going to pay Parsons. They know they can do that because they can control those contracts. The only, like, wild card here is Dak Prescott. And I had this take earlier in the offseason, is I think if you want to win 12 games this season, you got to sign Dak Prescott. If you want to win a Super Bowl, you got to get off Dak Prescott. But I think the opportunity didn't really get to show itself because the run on quarterbacks in the draft. I thought Bo Nix or Michael Penix would have been the perfect fit for the Dallas Cowboys in the first round. But those guys went top 12 when no one thought that would happen. Like, most people thought Bo Nix wasn't even going to be a first-round pick, and he went number 12. Michael Penix, the same thing. He was like maybe a late first. And that's, I think, I don't know. I might have said that on the podcast, but I know I've told you that. Like, That's what I would have done, but you couldn't do it because
Yeah.
there was no way Dallas could have gotten that high in the draft. So they're kind of stuck now where I think you got to pay Dak because it's like, if you don't, what are you stuck with? Like, we've seen teams that the Jets, they can't find a quarterback, and you don't want to not have one, but I would have, if I like, that was the missed opportunity of the offseason, I thought. And it's not their fault that they missed that opportunity. It just didn't work out. But I would have tried to do that, sit the rookie for a year, let Dak be Dak Prescott would turn into a 3rd round comp pick at that point, and just let him go. Play out this year, see if you can win. And then he probably doesn't because he's Dak Prescott and he doesn't make it past the divisional round. He never.
Yeah.
I don't know. This team's weird. I want to like him, but I can't like him enough to ever think that they're going to make the NFC title game. If you get what I'm saying there.
Yeah, no, I kind of roll considering what they lost, and what they lost was they were good players, but obviously guys on the back 9, might even say the back 6 of their career, like they're getting closer to the 18th hole than they are to the 9th hole anymore. But they did need they needed a few needs. Obviously, they needed help on the offensive line. They got Guyton in the 1st round. He's going to replace Tyron Smith. That was a no-brainer. And
it's a big transition, though.
It's a massive transition.
I mean, to ask him to be anything
you're
like
not going to be
Tyron
Smith.
Yeah. They've been so spoiled.
Tyler, I always pronounce his name wrong. It's Biadasz, right?
Biadasz, I think is how you say it.
Yeah, that's right. He went to Washington. They got Cooper Beebe, who I think
I liked that pick.
I wanted Cooper Beebe. Every time I did a Bears mock draft, I would draft him. I think he's going to be good. He's a great run blocker. But those are big shoes to fill again. Like replacing Tyron Smith. Big shoes to fill.
If there is a team I trust in offensive line evaluations, though, it's this team.
That is true.
I feel like they never miss.
They're
the last crappy tackle I remember playing for the Cowboys was Flozell Adams, and that was 10 plus years ago.
The funniest thing about what Dallas did, I thought, was everyone's known that they needed a help at running back.
Yeah,
and they went back to the guy that made them think, oh man, we need help at running back. They went back to Zeke Elliott. He wasn't producing at the contract. Is he still technically getting I think
they
technically still owe him money off of his previous deal, and now he's on a new deal with them.
I didn't write this down, but I actually from what I've read about Zeke's year in New England, I actually don't think he graded that poorly from a PFF standpoint. Now, if you look at yards per carry and explosive plays, he didn't do great, but that's not Zeke, right? Zeke's game is, I think Zeke is basically going to be when the Cowboys get inside the 5-yard line, this.
He had a 45% success percentage according to Pro Football Reference, which is below what he had in 2020. It's the worst of his career. But he is not the same guy anymore. 45% also isn't absolutely terrible. It's okay.
He was a top 5.
And I was rooting for the Patriots often towards the end of the season because of I wanted the Bears to get a little bit more space with the Panthers pick. And I do remember him cashing in a couple times for New England. He was actually a little bit better in the passing game in New England than he was with Dallas. I remember kind of. Now, of course, New England didn't have the receivers Dallas did. So in comparison, Zeke looked terrible when he was with Dallas catching the ball versus New England, where he looked like the most reliable option at times.
I think
it's kind of funny. I do kind of wonder if they're going to be a team that maybe trades for Khalil Herbert come training camp or something like that, or I don't know what's another running back that might become available. over between now and the trade deadline.
I think
But
one thing to consider, and this is just my background knowing Mike McCarthy, is go back and look at like his teams from 2007 all the way through really at the end of his career, 2018 in Green Bay, like when he had all his success. Ryan Grant, Brandon Jackson, Eddie Lacy was probably the highest end draft capital player because he went in the late second round. They don't
found Aaron Jones,
DeJuan Harris. Yeah,
DeJuan Harris.
Aaron Jones was he didn't even use Aaron Jones. That's the thing. It's like that was a big criticism, but Ty Montgomery was a receiver that they made into a running back. Like, I don't think this team and this offense and like McCarthy's philosophy, I just don't think they value that position that much. And it showed when they just let Tony Pollard walk. They didn't even offer him a deal.
Well, he also wasn't. I thought he was going to be a lot better in a new role last year, and he was not.
Yeah, and I think people put so much stock into what McCarthy said at the end of the 22 season, where he's like, we need to be. He was talking about being like more physical on the line of scrimmage, and like people took that as like we're gonna run it down people's throats, and it's like no, McCarthy's never been that kind of coach. Like they don't. No. He's never been a run the ball kind of guy. Like if you understand what he's basically saying is like they got to pass protect better and like stay ahead of the chains. But like what he means by that is like limit negative plays. And I think Kellen Moore got like so into like, hey, every play's got to be a deep shot type of thing. Like I think it was more of an indictment on Kellen Moore is what happened last year. And Schottenheimer is just calling plays but McCarthy's running the show. I just don't put a ton of running back. A lot of people criticize him for that. It's like, that's just, we know that's what Dallas and that's what McCarthy does. I just don't think they value it that much. I like this defense, and specifically because I like Mike Zimmer running a defense. I can't remember the last time I saw a Mike Zimmer defense not be at least top half of the league. And with some of these pieces, I really am excited. He's getting Eric Kendricks to come back and play middle linebacker, which I think is probably a good move because he knows the defense and he can be the green dot player. We mentioned Micah Parsons. He's just a game breaker in every sense of the word. Like when you think of top defensive players in the game, Micah Parsons is on that list. Trayvon Diggs didn't play much last year, but I mean, we saw him have a huge 2021. He's had 18 interceptions since 2020. And then Deron Bland he led the league with 9 picks last year. So I really like the defense. This is a team, I think, like, even though the skill players don't feel that great, because, like you mentioned, the running backs don't look that good. They're transitioning a little bit on the offensive line. I think this defense is going to step up a little bit more with Mike Zimmer. I still think 12 wins could be in the cards. I would say win totals between, I would say 9 to 12. I think this team's going to have a winning record, though. I think they're too good for that.
Absolutely. I that's what I have them around there. The only thing with their defense, and I do like their defense, and I love Mike Zimmer. I also think it's great that, like, when I first started watching football, 2001, which would be 24 seasons ago, Mike Zimmer was the defensive coordinator of the Cowboys then. So it's kind of cool that, like, in one way that hasn't changed. I mean, obviously, that has changed many times over, but like it went back to that. And actually, he coached Dion and the Cowboys secondary in the mid 90s. So that's also kind of wild. Like, he's back with the same franchise.
I think if you look at Mike Zimmer has gotten so much, I think Minnesota with Rick Spielman, I never felt like they drafted great at corner. I think this is going to be one of the best corner groups that Zimmer's ever worked with.
Yeah.
Now, I can't say that about safety because Harrison Smith was a damn good safety in Minnesota.
Yeah.
But like Trevon Diggs and Deron Bland and Al Harris at DB coach, like that's going to be the best group that I think Zimmer's ever had in terms of defensive group. Like and a lot of people were like Brett Coleman was talking about this on his podcast. It's like Al Harris is going to get defensive coordinator jobs or get a job interview. And maybe in 3 or 4 years, he might be even getting like head coach interviews. That's how really good he's been at coaching up his defense. A little surprised he didn't follow Dan Quinn to Washington, but I think coaching under Zimmer is not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, I think it might work out for him in the long run. We'll talk about Dallas's in their final standing towards the end of the show, but me and Steven are both pretty high on them right now. We both had them as a winning team, a playoff team. Where they land, we'll tell you later.
Yeah, I'm on the fence, but we'll go into that. Next team, the New York Giants.
The New York Football Giants.
A team that's definitely going to have a winning record. Just kidding. I don't think that's going to happen.
So, last season, the Giants missed the playoffs for the 10th time in 12 years. So that's dating back to when they won Super Bowl 46. That was that. Super Bowl 46. They went 6-11 last year, but the record was definitely more flattering than most metrics showed. They were the third worst team in the NFL in DVOA and SRS, which is Pro Football Reference's bite at DVOA, basically.
Yeah.
So basically they overperformed expectations and they still lost 11 games. Not great. On offense, they didn't run, pass, or block well. So what was it? Who was the coach of the Buccaneers? Why can't I think of his name now?
Rich McKay.
Or John McKay.
John McKay. Rich McKay's his son.
When they had that soundbite of him, he was mic'd up. I think it was only for a preseason game, but he was like, "We can't pass, we can't run the ball, but other than that, we're doing okay."
I have a question for you, like, because I know, like, we have our Sunday viewing experience. Did you actually watch the Giants last year? Like at all? Like
I did.
Like how much Giants? I should say, because I know you watched some, but like how much?
I watched when they played you guys on Monday Night Football, and
unwatchable product. Like it made me it made me frustrated. Like
that was a very frustrating game. I can imagine.
Yeah.
I watched another. It was the Week 17 game where like the Bears still had like an outside chance of making the playoffs. It had like the Giants beaten. I don't even remember who they were playing. I think they were playing the Rams, and Mason Crosby, who was kicking for the Giants last year.
I remember this game.
It's all just coming back to me now. He lined up for a field goal and he absolutely shanked it. And I think had he made it, the Bears would have been in a situation where, like, I think in Week 18 they would have needed a win, but I think only 2 losses from other teams.
Yeah,
and they would have I think made the playoffs, or they would have had a shouting chance. And so I watched that play and the Packers game. So that was about it for my Giants viewing. Oh, they did play. Who did they play on Monday Night Football? And they got absolutely annihilated.
Seattle.
Yes. Yeah. I watched
Seattle. Yeah. And then the Saints game. I watched that.
I don't remember that one.
That was just like a 1:00. I had Saquon in a fantasy league, but so I was watching that game, and that was what I want to say is it was one of the worst offenses, and not really scheme. It's just the lack of talent.
The lack of the talent. Yeah, I mean injuries purged that team.
Yeah.
But even
it was
with a
frustrating to
healthy
watch.
team, I don't know how much better they would have been.
Yeah.
But and Tommy DeVito might have been their most exciting play. I know that's a name you don't like to hear because of that game, but he was he was completing like 5-yard checkdowns, and like the Meadowlands was going nuts because they were like, "Oh my God, we're moving forward."
Yeah, and that's what's so weird about the Giants and like with Tommy DeVito last year, because really like he was able to kind of like semi move the offense down the field by just scrambling here and there, like get a 10-yard scramble, get a dump off pass to Saquon Barkley and let him scamper for 15 yards, get a field goal, don't turn the ball over.
Yes.
And that's the thing about Daniel Jones is like he can do all those things, like the positives, right? The scrambling, the dump off passes, like he's got good short term, I wouldn't say he's an accurate downfield thrower by any means, but like in these short to intermediate passes, like he can complete those. Like he's a capable quarterback. It's the damn mistakes that the dude makes. It's just like
taking sacks.
The taking sacks, it's the negative stuff. They got to get rid of that. And it's so frustrating watching because I like.
And see, here's the thing: like at this point of his career, if we're still talking about like he's
too late,
it's too late.
Yeah,
and I kind of like. I don't like Daniel, but I kind of do like Daniel Jones.
I
don't feel bad for him. I like him as a competitor.
I like his. He showed me a lot in 2022. I think he would be like he's going to be like the league's best backup quarterback.
He
the next like 5 or 6 years.
I see Mike Kafka on my TV right now.
He's way better than like Marcus Mariota.
He reminds me of somebody that could have. I know, like we bring up this comparison, but it literally only happened. Well, maybe it happened to Jim Plunkett too. He reminds me like he could be Alex Smith.
Yeah, and that's actually the one guy you could say that didn't figure out until like figured all out until like year 7.
Yes. Now he was the exception, not the rule, but you never know. Defensively, the Giants were better in comparison. They did lead the NFL in takeaways. They actually had the league's best turnover differential, and
they still fired their defensive coordinator.
Yes, and there was some weird things going on there.
Yeah, because Wink Martindale's not even in the NFL anymore.
Yeah,
he's at Michigan.
I don't know how good he's going to be at recruiting, but they already have great talent at Michigan defensively, so I'm sure.
I'm guessing there's other people that will probably do the recruiting, and then he can like all he'll have to say is like, "Oh, I've coached da 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 da." Like I'll get you the league, and then that's what those kids care about anyway.
Michigan has a pipeline with former Baltimore Ravens coaches, obviously because of John Harbaugh, but like there's just a constant like the Michigan or the Ravens acts as like a training ground for a coach to become a coordinator at one or both. They were also top 10 on third downs too. However, they struggled mightily defending the run. They desperately needed to upgrade their defensive front this year, and they were not good in the red zone. Obviously, that's usually where you need to be able to defend the run the most.
I like a lot of the talent that they've up front. I don't really like their back end a ton. Dexter Lawrence, I would actually say, I think he was the highest graded interior run defender on PFF.
Who is the guy from the Panthers too?
Brian Burns. They traded.
No. It's kind of funny. Like obviously, when you're a bad team, you're gonna see the run a lot more because teams are gonna be running out the clock on you. But your defensive linemen always have like career years on bad teams. Like Dexter Lawrence, the guy in the Panthers, and not Brian Burns, but there was a guy, Christian Barmore, obviously had a great year last year.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about the 3 worst teams in football, and they each had a defensive lineman that was like stellar.
I'm not sure, but what I noticed was Dexter Lawrence being the highest graded interior defensive lineman in the NFL. And I like the unit that they have put together on the defensive line because you do have him manning the middle. You have the 2 edge rushers, Brian Burns, who was with Carolina last year. I like Kayvon Thibodeau. He's really he didn't grade out great on PFF. I thought that was a little weird, but he had 13 sacks. So to me, he was in the 50s for PFF grade, which is not good. But it's like, how do you get 15 sacks?
Well, sacks aren't predictive.
But sacks aren't predictive, but getting 13 of them in a season, that you're around the quarterback enough.
Yeah, but Robert Quinn had 18 sacks for the Bears one year, and it was nobody really even noticed across the NFL.
And the fact he did as a second-year player, though, is what I was getting to. Because a lot of guys don't even have that career year, because that's a career year for a lot of players, or for 99% of players, to be honest. But him doing that as a year 2 guy, he was really good as a rookie. Kind of took a step back. Bobby Okereke was actually one of the most reliable inside backers. He was really good against the run. I think this defense is going to be pretty good. They have some questions in the back end. They lost Xavier McKinney, but I like the Tyler Nubin pick a lot for them. The question to me, and I don't see it happening. I think the impact player on this roster is going to have to be Malik Neighbors, who they took in the top 10 from LSU. He was, I would argue, and a lot of people disagree with me on this, and look at me throwing darts again because Neil called me out for that last week. I wouldn't actually say this because I still think I would take Marvin Harrison over him. But I don't think I think it's safe to say Malik Neighbors was actually the best receiver in college football last year. If you just look at what he did, he's an explosive athlete. He could win at the catch point. He lines up pretty much anywhere. So he can be the X receiver. He can play the Z. He's a slot. He can play the flanker position. He can do everything. He was the highest graded wide receiver in college football per PFF, 4th in the NCAA in missed tackles forced, which I think is huge because that's one thing this offense didn't generate. It was big plays in the passing game with yards after catch, and then 3.64 yards per route run. And what this is going to do is at least it brings some type of a threat downfield for this team, right?
Yeah,
where they have to pay attention. They have to respect this passing game. And in Daniel Jones's defense, because it sounds crazy to defend Daniel Jones because he was so bad last year when he was healthy. He only had 2 good quarters in 6 games with that comeback in Arizona. That's the only time he was ever not terrible last season. That's how bad the Giants were last season.
That was the only time they scored over 20 points until December.
They were horrendous. But I will say, you're throwing Darius Slayton, gross. Sterling Shepard, who hasn't been a good athlete.
Who was there forever.
Kenny Galladay's still getting paid, probably. You have just these, no offense, but corpses at receiver. And they no explosive plays, and everyone was just honing in on Saquon. That's the only explosive player they had on this entire offense. Darren Waller, went to do a rap album. He's done. There was no threat. Yeah, that's sad. But there was no semblance of a threat in the passing game, and I think that that's probably gonna change. And the one thing I'll defend Daniel Jones, he's never had a player like that in his career. So
yeah,
I think I'm going to give Daniel Jones one more chance. Do I expect much from him? No, not really. I think he's probably going to fail like he's failed.
Yeah, it's a lot to put on a rookie wide receiver too to carry him like that.
No, but I think if a guy were to pull a Jamar Chase, AJ Green, Julio Jones type rookie season, where they're getting 12, 13, 1,400 yards as a rookie, I could see it being this kid. He is dynamic.
Drew Lock was their backup.
And he might have a chance.
He might have. I was just thinking he might be the best quarterback on the roster.
Yeah, to me, Daniel Jones is a good quarterback if you eliminate the turnovers. The problem is he has never done that. And at some point, you just kind of have to call a spade, and it's not going to change. He's going to keep turning it over, and you can't win like that. My question for you about the Giants before we move on to the Eagles. Is Daboll on the hot seat?
No.
I agree. I don't think he should be.
It's New York, so I'm sure if you looked at the odds on, not first coach. Hey, maybe he is on there. I'm sure first coach to be fired. He might be in the top 5. Yeah. But the team is so deficient in I don't know if he's a great coach. I mean, he did a great coaching job in 2022 because they played out of their skin. They were not as good as their record was, and they won a playoff game.
And you said it earlier. This team wasn't as good as their record last year. The guy has
they literally outperformed their win total by 3 wins. Yep. Probably altogether, in the 2 years that he has coached them, they've probably outperformed their win total by 7 or 8 total wins.
That's what I'm getting at is I think if this team can figure out their talent deficiencies. And the other thing we haven't mentioned, and I think you mentioned it briefly, is they have had a problem with injuries specifically. Their offensive line was decimated last year, and I think they ended up giving 85 sacks up, which 85 was sacks, second in league history in a single season. A lot of that was due not only Evan Neal's being, he was terrible, and that was a big factor, but the other part is they had so many injuries up front, they couldn't protect. So can they get healthy, and have they added enough talent? Because I think if there's 3 things that I think have to happen for the Giants to get back to the playoffs. I give them a 15% chance of getting back to the playoffs, something like that. Daniel Jones has to stop turning it over. They have to hit on a few draft picks. So hit on Malik Neighbors, and then get healthy. That's the third one is they have to have some injury luck, and they haven't had that in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
If they can get all 3 of those, I see this team getting to maybe 9 wins, maybe 10. But all in all, I don't see all 3 of those things happening. I think Daboll is not going to make this team a 4-win team, though. I think this team is right at where they were last year. I'd put them at I'm going to say 6 wins again. That's where I feel like the Giants are.
I'll have to go through their schedule before we finish and pick
I don't look at the schedules because they change so much, but
I know, but I'm just doing it because of schedule predictor. That's how because I'm trying to put together the full slate. But Daboll strikes me as a guy that if he does get fired, he's going to get a second chance somewhere else. I'm just thinking that I just don't know how this is going to work out in New York. He needs a quarterback. Maybe we talked about it earlier. Maybe it's going to be Dak. You don't really want to rely on the rookie quarterbacks next year. I think he went there because of Joe Schoen or Joe Shane or whatever the hell his name is. But
who knows it? Once they have a chance to, they give it because their roster turnover like they've done in the last few years. Because Gettleman kind of did a horrible job, and to say the least, Kadarius Toney was his chef's kiss for the world. But
remember when he drafted Daniel Jones, he saw one game and said, "That's my quarterback."
I think my favorite Gettleman moment though was during COVID, and he was in a room by himself at his house, and he's wearing a mask. He's in his office at home, and he's just and he looked like he was by himself in a large room, just kind of going who did they draft that year? 2020 NFL
2020.
Kadarius Toney was 21.
21, yeah. I don't remember.
Yeah, and because Daniel Jones was 19, New York Giants drafted Andrew Thomas. It was a good pick.
Yeah.
So I think did they have 2 picks? I think they just had
21, they had 2 picks because they had the Bears. That was when they drafted Evan Neal.
And that was bad.
That was bad.
No, they drafted Evan Neal was 22.
Yes, that was the Bears pick in 22.
Oh, because the Bears traded up for Justin Fields in 21.
So the Bears, I guess, won the Justin Fields trade.
I think we finally found a situation where no one won.
Yeah.
So yeah, like
moving on.
Yeah, but anyway, Philadelphia.
So last
everybody
year,
just Howie's the best GM in the world.
Howie's gonna trade for you name it. He's gonna trade for Joey Bosa mid-season, and yeah, everything.
I'm pretty sure Howie Roseman's like scouting department, he just like downloads the PFF draft guide. Like I'm convinced. Yeah. Like, and then people will go like at the end of the draft,
I want
like
that guy.
The best draft was the Eagles because it matched our draft grade.
Yeah. How did that happen?
Yeah. The only time what's hilarious is the best pick he's made was the one everybody ripped him for. And that was the Jalen Hurts pick.
Yeah.
And he aced that one. And like the day before, they're going, Jalen Reagor, that's a good pick. And it's like you took him a spot ahead of Justin Jefferson, but okay. Like, oh,
there's always that video of the Vikings war room.
Well, yeah, they're like
the war
laughing.
Zoom. I got you. Yeah, they were laughing at it.
Yeah,
but
Rick Spielman's going like, I can't believe they did it.
Wow, he's always, I can't believe our luck.
I gotta find my like sunglasses to wear inside because that's what Rick Spielman always like. He's the guy that's wearing like this. What are what are they called? The sunglasses that like.
Oh yeah, that changed from
transition lenses.
Transition,
yeah. Well, and Jim Harbaugh started on those. Like it's just like the funniest look in the world. Adam Sandler from when he was in Uncut Gems, like he brought those back to popularity. Apparently, it's like. If you want to look like the guy from like, so when he's winning the national championship, like you can't even see his eyes because there's just like blue shade like over his eyes. And I'm like, we're inside. Why are you wearing sunglasses?
That's how light it was inside NRG Stadium.
Yeah. So the greatness of the trophy just, I guess, overtook him.
The Eagles made the playoffs for the 6th time in the last 7 years, which is kind of a lot when you think about it. They only missed the playoffs during the COVID year, and they kind of designedly like punted on that season. It always felt like.
Yeah, and as much as I make fun of the Howie Roseman thing, like he has done a good job. Like,
and we will continue to make fun of him.
It's not really him; it's the media's
infatuation with him. The Eagles fans that think that Howie can do no wrong.
Yeah, which. I think he's made some mistakes, but
as all GMs do.
As every GM does, like you don't get all of them right just because you like your draft grade, but okay. But a lot of playoff appearances for them.
The Eagles started 10-1, and then they lost 5 of their last 6. I don't think it was so much that they started playing worse after that. I think the results started catching up with them. Like according to DVOA, like when they were 10-1. And by like Pythagorean expectation, like they were kind of playing above their level. And I think the results, like the regression just hit really fast and really hard. So they probably were always an 11-6 team. But it just felt worse because of the way it started.
And their schedule was pretty easy the first few months of the season, and then it got really difficult.
And then it got decidedly. The only game they won. Oh, that's another Giants game I watched. The only game they won down the stretch was Christmas Day,
and they should have lost that game.
They should have too. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Their offense was top 10, but it certainly was not nearly as dominant as they were in 2022. I kind of wonder, was that because they missed Shane Steichen?
It could be. I mean, if you look at, it's not, to me, it wasn't just Shane Steichen. I mean, I would have argued having brain fart here. Who's the coach in Jonathan Gannon in
Jonathan
Arizona?
Gannon, yeah.
They lost both of their coordinators and replaced them with guys that are even no longer there. So like,
and now they have more coordinators coming in.
I think these two guys, especially defensive coordinator Vic Fangio, I think is a massive upgrade because wasn't it Matt Patricia that ran the defense last year?
Yeah.
So
and Sean Desai.
Yeah, Sean Desai was like the official coordinator, but like anytime Matt Patricia's assigned to your defense, like it just falls apart like immediately.
Oh yeah.
It's been 7 or 8 years since Matt Patricia's been like associated with a good defense.
Their defense, as they were very bad, especially against the pass. They were the second worst team in the league on third down. So, and like so that was something that was kind of always prevalent in that 10-1 start. Like they weren't playing well. Like and what people need to understand is like I always see like when a team now I guess I understand the fans' perspective because this happens every year to a few teams and their fans where a team is playing above their wits and, you know, some analytics group is like, yeah, you know, but they're not playing great. That doesn't mean you can't enjoy the wins. Like people like that. I remember Eagles fans getting so defensive at this point. Like, what are you talking about? We're 10-1. We're going to win the NFC again. Well, probably not with the way you're playing right now. And sure enough, that's how it. That's
and you never know.
That was the Vikings 2 years ago.
I mean, and you never know because like last year the Chiefs weren't really that great either, and they won the damn Super Bowl. So
they have a good guy at quarterback.
Yeah, well, I think the key in the regular season is to win games, and then but traditionally you want to be playing almost like you want to be ascending at the end of the season. The Eagles did not do that. They fell apart, and you could. Honestly, in the playoff game, like I got the vibe that they quit. Like I don't think that they wanted to play in that game.
Yeah,
and like
their season Super Bowl was beating like a very at the time average Bills team, and it took everything out of them. It looked like to beat that Bills team.
Yeah, but the thing that got me interested about the Eagles, and I think they understand this. So Jalen Hurts 2022 passer rating was above 100. He was an MVP candidate, like very good. Got him to the Super Bowl, great season, right? 2023, that passer rating dropped down to 89.1. So that's a 10% drop in passer rating. Like you normally never see that steep of a drop in a single season, right? Yards per attempt went from 8 to 7.2. That's a pretty that's a substantial drop too. 15 interceptions. And that's the thing that kind of caught my eyes. Like that's a lot of turnovers. And in summary, Jalen Hurts declined pretty substantially last year. Not bad enough to where he's not going to lose a starting job, but he still deserves a big contract. I'm not saying he sucks or anything like that. What I'm saying is that you can't just like think that this team is just going to throw it all over the field. And DeAndre Swift is not reliable enough to build a run game around 100%. And that's why I think Saquon's actually going to be pretty meaningful for this team. I think they're going to get back to a lot of their roots that made them really special in 2022. I feel like they got a little pass heavy last season. But the thing that like I see that signing and I think that's really good. And I think they need to go back in that direction. And then I see Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator. So I have no idea what direction we're going to go in. Because Kellen Moore is like when he was with the Chargers and with the Cowboys, it's like they led the league in pass attempts per game. So I don't know what's going to happen with his offense. But I know for this, they got to get more efficient again. And I think less is more on that side with Jalen Hurts. And I think making your life easier with explosive plays with Saquon is going to be really interesting, and not just in the run game, in the pass game too. And the key to me for this entire team is their defense. They have to get more out of their defense. They drafted Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean and any other Georgia players I'm missing. I think those are the big three on defense. But the point is, like, we hear all about the hype that these guys, Nolan Smith actually is another one. Like, all of these Georgia guys, like, and there's other players that are talented, big names on defense. They drafted Jeremiah Trotter. Well, it's about time they produce, because they haven't. Last year, the Eagles were 30th in points allowed. That's a bad defense. Like, you can't be that low and expect to contend for the NFC, especially when you're probably going to have to deal with the Niners to get there, right? And the Detroit Lions have an elite offense at this point. 31st in touchdown passes allowed. You got a lot of new starters. You drafted Quinion Mitchell. You got Cooper DeJean. There's a lot of things up in the air. They had some aging guys, like Brandon Graham's still there. Like, is he? Brandon Graham's still there. Fletcher Cox retired, but like, these young kids that they drafted, it's time for them to step up, right? And they haven't done it yet, especially in the second half of last season. Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, like, they were MIA. That's got to change this year. This team, and I think Vic Fangio is the right kind of coach to go in with these players. But I think that's where, if they're going to make the Super Bowl again, it's going to be because their defense makes that leap. I don't think their offense is that bad, or was that bad last season. It was less efficient than it's been in the past, and you'd like to see Jalen Hurts get back to that elite level play that he was at. But their defense, it has to get better for them to not just win the NFC East, but to try and compete for the NFC.
Yeah, just in general with Philly, I wrote as kind of my theme for them, or my burning question, I guess. They showed a lot of ugliness last year, and I guess that was kind of prevalent in 2022 in some ways, but it looked like arrogance and it looked like fun because they were winning, and they were
but like the big Dom stuff,
the big Dom stuff. It's obviously all the stuff with the defense, changing out defensive coordinators in the middle of the season, when that really the issue? Obviously it wasn't the issue. The defense didn't get any better when they went to Patricia. Got worse, actually.
Go figure.
When they were playing in Kansas City and Sirianni was coming off the field, like, screaming at the Chiefs fans, like as if he was a player and he won the game for the, like, silly things like that.
Even Howie Roseman, or this might have been 2 years ago, was like yelling at fans or whatever.
Yeah, I know they like to, like, build that up because they're Philly and they think that like
the world's against them.
City. Yeah, the world's against them. But you look like you have egg on your face when you lose 5 of your last 6 games, and you do that, like, it just looks dumb. And they can't have a season crowded like that again, because you don't have that locker room presence of Jason Kelce anymore. I know Lane Johnson's still there, but Lane Johnson, I think, is going to be considering on moving, and he wasn't the guy that Kelce was in terms of the way he led the locker room.
Well, like, Lane Johnson and Brandon Graham, are those the only guys left from the Super Bowl team?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I think that's the case. And
yeah,
I mean, and that's normal. It's been 7 years since they won the Super Bowl, but, like, it's, this team, to me, like, they showed a lack of mental toughness. I think, like, 2022 was easy. Like their schedule was easy.
Yes.
Their trip to the Super Bowl really couldn't get much easier because you beat a Giants team that had no business making it that far, but
Yep.
they
got a
did somehow.
the first. They were gonna either get the Giants or the Vikings, and
Yeah.
it worked out for them.
And then in
Or
the
they were to get the
NFC
Cowboys.
title game, if I have never been more convinced now, especially after watching Brock Purdy for another season. If he doesn't hurt his elbow, I think the 49ers win the NFC that year. Like I think they beat Philly in that game.
Like
But
the
we'll never know.
They were, I think the 49ers were getting touted as favorites or it was a pick 'em nearly.
Yeah.
Going
people
into
good. The 49ers were like a legit team. I mean, think about it. They were on their third string quarterback and they were still like the 2 seed. Like that season. But to me, everything was easy for Philadelphia in 2022.
Yeah.
They made the Super Bowl, but they lost. But like in 2023, the first half of the season, like their schedule was pretty easy. And like this team, when it's easy, they can do it. But like when shit hit the fan,
it got bad for them.
It got really bad. And that I almost think that if I were Jeffrey Lurie and I saw that playoff game, I would have considered firing Sirianni after that game. I know that sounds crazy to say, but like I didn't get very good vibes. And like you mentioned, I mean, like the whole Big Dom thing too would have rubbed me the wrong way. Like
that guy should have been fired immediately after that.
You can't push a player. Like you're a staff dude. Like come on.
The fact that they have that guy on their sidelines just shows the arrogance that they think that they're entitled to.
Yeah, and to me, like I don't see Andy Reid doing that stuff.
No,
but there is no denying that this team has a lot of talent. But winning the Super Bowl and winning games in the NFL, it's more than just collecting talent. Like, and we saw all this talent on display last year in December when it looked like they quit. That's my big question. Like, if things don't break the right way for them this year, does it all fall apart on them? Like, it's not always going to be easy, right? Things don't just always fall your way. Injuries don't always go your way. On paper, I like the Eagles just as much, but I really question their coach, their head leadership, and Nick Sirianni is what worries me. I don't trust him.
Yeah.
But I do trust Vic Fangio to fix their defense, though, and hold them accountable. We'll see what happens, though. But I have this team almost around where they were last year, 10 to 12.
Yeah, very similar, very similar.
Yeah.
All right. And then
Commander time?
Yeah, it's time for the commies.
We're going way faster than we did last week.
We are. We have a nice little rhythm to us, I feel like, this week.
Yeah.
We had a good rhythm last week, but we spent so much time talking about the damn Dolphins. No, the Patriots.
The Patriots. It was the Patriots. It was like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? So anyways, the Washington Commanders. Last season, the only team worse than Washington was Carolina last year. So
good for you.
Yeah, you weren't the worst team. You were the second worst team. The offense was bad. They were bottom 10 in the league, but they did have a little bit of excitement to them. They threw the ball a lot down the field. I don't think any team threw the ball more than Washington did last year. Now, granted, they were losing a lot. They just didn't complete a lot of passes. The defense, however, on the other hand, was absolutely terrible. They arguably were the worst defense in the NFL.
I just think of Emmanuel Forbes specifically.
Yes.
Like the AJ Brown game where it's like just toasting him every play.
They fired Ron Rivera, and didn't they fire Jack Del Rio mid-season too?
Yeah. I think both of those guys were well past their prime.
Well past, yeah.
And last year, like the Panthers were horrible. They were worse, obviously, talent-wise, coaching-wise. But this was one of the saddest teams to watch last year because it just felt
because we all like
directionless.
Ron Rivera. So to see that ship deteriorate as fast as it did.
It just this team doesn't feel like it last year. It didn't feel like it had a direction.
No, it didn't. It didn't at all.
I'll say this about Washington, like from an offseason standpoint. I think they had one of the best off seasons just because of the way they're restructuring things. They got a new owner. Dan Snyder's finally out, right? So Josh Harris comes in. He was owner of the 76ers. I think that alone is going to redefine a lot of what they do. But that being said, this team ain't winning the NFC East this year. I'll just say that right now.
Yeah. So my thing for them this season is they're probably a ways away from competing. I said for a year or so. It might be longer. Just given who they have in their division, Dallas, and Philly's still better than them, a good bit better than them. But they do have Jaden Daniels now. They do believe that he is going to be their new franchise quarterback. That's the plan. Can he find his groove in his rookie year to eventually give Washington fans their first winner of the 21st century? It's been a long time since Washington. I'm not talking about, they won the division in 2020 when they went 7-9, or when they went 9-6-1, or whatever it was in 2015, and they won the division that year.
You're talking about like a 12-win season.
I'm talking like a 12-win, like we're competing for a Super Bowl like we were in the early 90s and the 80s. It's been a long time for hell, even the Bears had a 2-year run in the mid 2000s where they were competing for a Super Bowl. Like Washington, it's been a long time. And I do feel for their fans because that's a very proud franchise. And what Daniel Snyder did to that franchise is terrible. Absolutely terrible. He absolutely tanked a proud fan base, a proud team. It was a very, very ugly tenure. I'm glad he's out. I sincerely hope that Washington gets back to. Now, I remember saying this when I was little, because when I was younger, the 49ers weren't good. Like the first probably 7 or 8 years that I watched, the 49ers made the playoffs like twice, and that was it. And I remember saying to my grandpa one time, I go, Papa, it would be kind of cool to see the 49ers be good again. And he was like, no, it wouldn't. I kind of regret saying that now.
Honestly, just forget when 90% of the NFC. Nah, I'm good. Even people were like, "Oh, Detroit's such a fun story." I'm like, "No, they're not."
I couldn't. When everybody was like, "Oh, it would be cool to see Detroit make the Super Bowl," I was like, "No." I hope.
I was one of the happiest people in the world.
Yes.
When they blew
here's
that
my
game.
thing. I think I've told you this before. If I can't be happy, I don't want anyone else to be happy.
It's petty, but I love it.
Yes.
My favorite thing about the Lions playoff loss to the 49ers was last offseason, NFL Films did the Stars' favorite games, and Amon-Ra St. Brown's favorite game was the 2014 NFC Championship game.
Oh,
so everybody on Monday morning, Packers Twitter was just like, "Hey, we found our favorite game." The
Jordan Love, if you get to go this year, this is what you're gonna pick.
Yeah, Jordan Love's favorite game, and it's the 2023 NFC Championship game. But going back to it, the Redskins, the Commanders will probably get
that's it. We're canceled.
No, yeah, we're canceled. But the Commanders, I almost wrote Redskins 16 times on this thing, but
I actually did too.
Yeah,
you can probably see at the edit history.
Yeah, I'll say I like what they've done. I mentioned the ownership change. Jaden Daniels, I think, is a super exciting quarterback prospect. Like, third lowest turnover worthy play percentage in college football last year, but has elite accuracy, big time throw percentage. He had the highest big time threat percentage in college football last year. The question marks with him are just really, to me, size and ability to throw over the middle of the field.
And not take sacks.
And not take sacks, but I also think that he is matched just with the perfect offensive coordinator for his skill set.
Yeah,
in Cliff Kingsbury.
It's going to be a fun offense.
Yeah, they're going to run like a college style, like where he is going to
get the ball out quick. Yeah,
that's going to be really his game. I like Dan Quinn as a coach. Like, a lot of people, like, he obviously 28-3. Everybody's going to remember that, but for the 28-3 thing to have happened, like, he got his team to a Super Bowl. He won games when he was in Atlanta. A lot of people forget how good the Falcons were in 2017, and that they probably should have made the Super Bowl that season. But they had a goal line stand go against them against Philly in the divisional round, who Philly ended up winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Steve Sarkisian had a really bad fourth down call, I remember.
I think this team feels like the classic. We'll get to the standings in a second, but this team feels like the classic, ascending 6-7 win team kind of feeling. Like, I don't think they're going to go 4-13 again. I think that they've added too much talent offensively, and just by the quarterback addition, like, this is going to be a way better offense than what they had with Sam Howell. And I like what they've. To me, there's just a culture change. I just get positive vibes. They've added some names defensively with Bobby Wagner, and just get Emmanuel Forbes off the field. He was the worst corner in the NFL last season, which is sad because he was a first-round pick, but just absolutely horrible. That's one reason why this defense was so awful last year. They didn't cover anyone. The other thing they got to fix is their offensive line. And that's the one concern I have for Jaden Daniels. We worry about him getting hurt. Can they protect him? They're going to have to figure that out. But Cliff Kingsbury was able to put offenses together with pretty poor offensive line units in Arizona. So I think he may be able to do something similar here in Washington. But I don't think this team is good enough to make a playoff run or anything like that, or even really contend to make the playoffs. But I see them as like a 6-7 win team that when we're doing our 2025 preview, I see us going like, I think this team could make the playoffs. Like, yeah, that's the kind of vibe I get for Washington.
Yeah. So they certainly did add a lot of guys in the offseason. I do wonder sometimes when teams do that. It's kind of like the Madden approach sometimes, like when like you just sign like every single guy that you kind of recognize their name like to a contract. Will that all mesh together? I guess it doesn't have to mesh for a long time. They're just trying to get off the ground this year and try to win a few more games and get people more excited and coming back to getting tickets so they don't have to tarp over seats in the stadium again. Or hopefully in the future they don't have to. I have my reservations about Jaden Daniels. I've said them all already during the draft stream, so I won't rehash them. But I think they are trending up. I mean, as we said, with how bad they were a year ago, it would be hard not to be trending up because they were truly terrible last year. It will be interesting to see how the defense comes around, and obviously that's going to have some effect on Jaden Daniels as a rookie. You never want your rookie quarterback to be chasing games too much. That defense still has a ways to go.
Yeah.
Like, even if they improve slightly, they're probably still like a bottom 5, bottom 10 defense.
Yeah, I agree.
And And then you're putting your rookie quarterback into some very difficult spots. Now, who knows? Maybe they do get a lot better, but it's hard to say that yet. But I think they did add enough offensively that they should scratch out a few wins. I'm kind of similar to you. I had them actually around the same record they had last year, but feeling better, because sometimes you can have that. You could have the same record as you did the year before, but
I mean, 4 wins is not very many.
it's not, but you could still have a better feeling about where you're heading. I went back and gave them a couple extra wins because I noticed some teams, they were starting to stockpile wins that in the future, when I'm doing their predictions, I'm not going to give them that many wins probably.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of similar to you where I have them in the standing.
So give me your, I guess, order of where you see the NFC East.
So this is how I see the NFC East finishing. I have Dallas as NFC East champions for the 3rd time in 4 years at 11-6. I have the Philadelphia Eagles making the wild card at 10-7. I have, on basis of a divisional record, because I have Washington going 3-3 in the division. They're going to finish 6-11, so they will be in 3rd place ahead of the 6-11 Giants.
Okay. I'm gonna go Philly in 1st place. I kind of see Dallas and Philly being neck and neck, and I'm just kind of picking against the Cowboys because it's going to come down to probably like a late season matchup between Philly and Dallas. I'll take Philly in that situation. I think I see Philly winning 11 games. I see Dallas winning the same. I'm going to do a range. I have Philly and Dallas both between 9 and 11 wins. I have the Commanders between 5 and 7 wins. And I have the Giants between 3 and 6 wins.
Yeah, me giving the Giants 6 wins is very flattering because I don't think they're very good at all. But I think the schedule actually is somewhat manageable for them. Yeah,
so the Giants have the most, to me, questions to answer.
Yeah, the Giants and Washington having the same record, but going in totally opposite directions. I feel like after this year.
I also think there's a possibility that the Giants do answer those questions. But even if they do answer those questions, we're probably still only looking at like a 6-7 win team.
Yeah.
To me, range of outcomes wise, Philly and Dallas to me feel right together. I think Philly's a little overrated. I think Dallas is underrated, but they're about the same. And then give me Washington as like a bad team, and the Giants is probably a really bad team.
Okay.
So that's kind of the way I see the East. And then whoever 2nd place, I have taking a wild card.
Yeah, well, with 3 wild card spots, it's always, if you can land yourself in 2nd place, you're going to have a good chance of making the playoffs.
But this division is going to be like, if Dallas isn't careful, like Philadelphia might have like the easiest division in NFL history next year.
Yeah.
If Dak Prescott leaves and then they're in a transition with a rookie quarterback, or maybe they go to Trey Lance. I don't know. Like, I don't anticipate that. But I mean, he hasn't. To be fair to Trey Lance,
walk like that again.
And to be fair to Trey Lance, like he really has not had a shot.
He hasn't had a chance. I'm not doing that towards Trey Lance. I'm doing that at the thought of Philly having a cakewalk.
It could probably happen. Sorry, I'm yawning. But it's late. But I think this is going to be an interesting division to kind of see unfold, because for the Washington and the Giants, this is such a crucial year to not take a step back. Like, you have to take a step forward.
You have to grow a little hair on your chest this year.
Because if you don't, you're going to be stuck in a situation where you're probably going to be just like Philly's stepping stone for the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But if Jaden Daniels can have that rookie season that gets him confidence and like they can build on something. Or if Daniel Jones finally figures out how to play without turning the ball over, and they can figure out some of the injury concerns and finally protect the quarterback, maybe the Giants can do what they did a couple years ago. And like, I'm saying this is a really far end outcome for them, but like maybe they make the playoffs. We've seen crazier things happen.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately that's how I would handicap the divisions. I think to take away, if you're watching this though, the silliest exercise is to put these teams as like definites for anything. Because what's funny is like if Patrick Mahomes goes out and tears his knee up in the preseason, then the Chiefs are not favorite to win. Like they go from favorites to win the Super Bowl to like 8-9, like 7-10 probably.
Right.
So the range of outcomes is contingent on everything, right?
Yeah.
So we're just doing our best. Like, where are the teams now? What do we think we're going to be seeing in 3 months? And like, what's the optimistic range of outcome? What's the pessimistic range? And that's kind of where we deal with it. Because I think I could even like if everything goes right for the Commanders, I could even see them like last week of the season doing what the Bears did, like being like 8-9 and maybe trying to get a playoff spot. Crazier things have happened. I don't anticipate that happening, but maybe that's like
even look at how different the Bears season was from the first month to the end of the season.
Yeah.
You know, so that happens to teams too. Like they get off to an awful start and then they just find a groove and like they kind of settle on that groove the rest of the season, even though they don't make the playoffs. But for the majority of the season, they were a better team than they were when they started.
And the hardest thing to get behind for people is like the adjustment you have to make with coaching changes, because it could be really good or really bad.
Yes.
Like when Jim Harbaugh took over for the 49ers in 2011, like it wasn't really that different of a roster. The only like all-star player they really added was Aldon Smith in the draft. But like nothing really changed. The 49ers were not a good team for like really 5 or 6 years. Like
they were
going back to T.O.
and
Jeff Garcia and them. Like they were not great. They go from like 7-9 with Troy Smith and Alex Smith, and the next season they're hosting the NFC title game. So that's the thing is like
that's why they play the games, as Boomer would say.
Well, that and like I made fun of Emmanuel Forbes for being the worst corner in the NFL last year. Well, you have new defensive coaches coming in. Maybe they just change up the way he's being used, and suddenly he like a light turns on and he's good.
Yeah.
Like, so it's not an exact science that you can't look, but
what we're saying, guys, is what we have to tell you is gospel. So you need to take this and
oh god, we're gonna get sued now. I'm just kidding. Yeah, but what we try to do is just we want to know as much about these teams as possible and kind of have a feel for where we think the division is going. So with that, that's the NFC East. Any thoughts before we end the stream?
No, we're 25% of the way through the divisions. This is the worst part of the year right now.
Oh, it's awful.
Stanley Cup final, a great Stanley Cup final ended on Monday.
We have round 2 of the NBA draft tomorrow, so we'll be fine.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, so the Hornets will take who did the Hornets draft? I don't know. But anyway, we'll see y'all later. Tune in next week for the AFC South. I'm Steven. He's Neil. Thanks for watching.